This is draft season. Hello, everybody. It's all brought to you by Moody's, a proud sponsor of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmelk, joined by Tony Pauline. Tony, how you be, sir?
Okay, I mean, some interesting games on the college front last week, some interesting games on the NFL front as we move to the midway point of the NFL season. Some big games on the college front coming up this year, but a lot of close calls last week in college football, but no real upsets. But we did
Yes.
see some good performances.
Yes, we are in the Hackensack Marine Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. And we do something a little bit different this week when we do our same review of last week of college football, look ahead to next week in college football. Kind of two sleepier weeks as we kind of slowly lead up towards, end of the conference play, conference championships, stuff like that. So we'll talk about that. But also, it's about midway point of the NFL season. There isn't really a true midway point anymore because there are 17 weeks, but 8 weeks are in the book. So we thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit about what the 2025 rookie class has done so far in the National Football League. Tony and I spent so much time talking about these kids leading up to the draft. I think it's important for us to look at what they've done and maybe learn some lessons from our evaluations last year, who's done well, who hasn't, and kind of see if that influences how we think about next year's class. But Tony, let's start with last week in college football, and you had a couple of quarterback matchups that you wanted to focus on.
Well, quarterbacks who played against each other. I mean, Lenore Sellers against Alabama and Ty Simpson. And, Ty Simpson is really developing into an outstanding quarterback. He's making a lot of NFL type throws.
Yeah.
He's making a lot of good decisions. You got to like his game. You got to like the development of his game. But I'm still concerned about the lack of the small body of work. He's an 8-9 game starter. The Lawrence Sellers, the physical skills are there. He just makes some incredible plays, but there's no consistency. He'll make an outstanding throw, and then there's two or three plays or two or three series where you wonder what he's thinking, what he's doing. I think he's hurt by the fact that when you look at that Alabama lineup, obviously their offensive line and the weapons at Ty Simpson's disposal are significantly better than what Lenore Sellers has. I think they failed him in that matter. But I don't think Lenore Sellers has really improved his game. And I'm going to say this, people talk about Mendoza. We had Mike Renner on last week who talked about Mendoza potentially being the first pick of the draft in the New York Jets. I like Mendoza, but Ty Simpson really looks more like an NFL quarterback at this point. I mean, he's making more NFL throws, NFL plays. He's being asked to do more and more, and he's doing it well. And the question with Ty Simpson, if he enters the draft, how high do you select him? There's that Mac Jones memory kind of come into play where the guy was a 1-year starter, no body of work. Are you willing to roll the dice on him?
Yeah, Tony, and I think that's the thing, and I agree with you. I think if I had to pick a quarterback in this class first overall right now, I think I'd probably pick Simpson just because I think he gives you the best odds of hitting the lottery, right? In terms of his upside. You talk about Mac Jones, Simpson, and in terms of the experience, but Simpson has more physical talent than Mac Jones. He's got a cannon. I mean, he has an absolute cannon. He can make all the throws. I think he needs to work on getting some touch on the ball on some throws. Everything seems to be a bit of a line drive like J.J. McCarthy was a couple years ago. But he has it. And to your point, though, the lack of experience worries me. A lot of the old Bill Parcells-isms, they don't really apply anymore. But I think one that does is that you want guys that have started 30 games in college football, right, and thrown X number of passes. That's a real thing. And the NFL, and Dane Brugler says this all the time, who was with us about a month ago, the NFL is not a developmental league, Tony. Anthony Richardson got picked 2 years ago, and Trey Lance, 4 years ago now? And the point was they didn't throw a lot of passes in college. They need time. They need development. Well, guess what? In 2 years, both teams that drafted those guys are like, nah, we're out. We can't wait. Sorry, we're done, finished. We're moving on. We're done. So I hope Simpson gets a boatload of money and goes back. And by the way, to your point, he's in not an NFL style offense, but his offensive coordinator was the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks last year, and Ryan Grubb. So, and Kalen DeBoer has a downfield passing attack. We saw that when he was in Washington with Penix and all those wide receivers that came out of the Huskies program. So, I mean, I'm with you. If I had to pick a quarterback first, and I would not feel good about picking a quarterback first overall this year for the record, I think it would probably be Ty Simpson for me right now.
Well, and the thing that you kind of skipped over there is his offensive coordinator was the offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks last year. Prior to that, where was he? He was
in Washington. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who did he develop? Michael Penix.
Yep.
I think he came to Alabama a year too late for Jalen Milroe.
Yep.
And now Ty Simpson is reaping the rewards of that. So there is, a significant advantage for him to return. Obviously, there's going to be a significant financial advantage for him to return. And then the other game was the Mississippi-Oklahoma game, where we talked about John Mateer. We both agree, and Dane was on. We all agreed he's playing much better than anybody expected. There were some concerns about his game, but he got outplayed by Trinidad Chambliss of Mississippi, who, if you remember, before he came in, because the starter was injured, no one knew of him. And I said, scouts like this guy as a potential day 3 pick. He's playing better than a day 3 pick. I mean, he is a tremendous RPO quarterback with great arm talent. This guy can make all the throws. He's making good decisions. The problem with Trinidad Chambliss is he's probably not even going to be 6 foot tall, but he significantly outplayed John Mateer on Saturday, and he keeps getting better and better and better. And if nothing else, that's going to be a story to watch. Trinidad Chambliss is not going to be a top 60 pick. I don't think he's going to be a day 2 pick because of the size, but he is developing at a rapid rate against real good competition.
Yeah, if you could just add 3 inches and 20 pounds to Trinidad Chambliss, I think we'd be talking about him in the same category as Ty Simpson, to be honest with you. But he's just, he's a Division II quarterback, right? And that's what Division II quarterbacks look like. But he's playing really, really well. All right,
incredibly well.
Yeah, incredibly well. And you got to give him credit. And again, we'll see. Ole Miss sets up their quarterbacks extremely well. We saw that with Jackson Dart last year, and now we got to see, Tony, if the coach is going to stay at Ole Miss. He's been rumored for Penn State. He's been rumored for LSU. I mean, more for LSU in Florida. But there's a lot of open big-time college program spots right now. I think this offseason, and we'll get to the 25 draft class in a second, this is going to be very interesting to see how the whole college landscape gets shuffled this year with all these coaching changes.
And there's probably going to be more before the season's over. You got to look at the Florida State situation. You got to look at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell, surprising to me, has not done a good job there. Does Luke Fickell make it to December? I don't know, the way things are going at Wisconsin. So there's going to be additional big-time jobs that are still going to open up before the season's over.
Yeah, exactly right. And there'll be a lot of people writing a lot of checks and promising a lot of money around college football, that's for sure. Draft season is presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity, learn more at Moody's.com. All right, Tony, before we get to the 2025 draft class, you have some day 2 wide receivers that you're excited about. And I'll be honest with you, the only guy I've really watched extensively in this group is Chris Bell out of Louisville. We talked about him last week with Mike Renner. Kind of has a very A.J. Brown feel to him. I think he's lacking some of that explosiveness that A.J. Brown has. I still see him with you. Some people talking about him as a day 1 guy. I don't. I think he's a day 2 pick like you. But talk about him and these other receivers that have really caught your eye.
Yeah, not just day 2 and day 3 guys. I mean, there is no definite number 1 receiver as of right now. You like the kid from Arizona State. I like Brazel from Tennessee, but where are they going to fit in? I mean,
Tony, I'll be honest with you. Brazel's growing on me. He's very impressive. Very impressive.
And the Arizona State kid is constantly having injury issues.
That's true.
Going to be concerned. He's not a big body receiver. So really, how many first-round receivers are there going to be? Are there going to be any first-round receivers? So you got to start to look at day 2, day 3. You mentioned Chris Bell. We spoke about him last week when Mike Renner was on the show. He's a bigger guy, but he's not just a possession receiver. He's a pretty quick guy. He's got great burst in that first 5 to 10 yards, which allows him to separate. He catches everything that's thrown to him, goes about 6'1", 220 pounds. He's really improved this year. He was good last year. I had him as a 3rd-round pick coming into the season. I don't think he's going to be a first-rounder. I would agree with you, but I think definitely top 60 somewhere in that 2nd round. A couple other guys, Casey Concepcion of Texas A&M. You talked about the LSU job opening up. Well, Casey Concepcion helped that LSU job open up with his performance on Saturday night. He's a smaller guy, but he's very explosive. 36 receptions, 7 touchdowns this year, is averaging 15 yards per catch. Also brings something to the return game. I have him as maybe a 2nd-round pick right now. He's a 3rd-rounder, but he's a speed guy who catches the ball extremely well. Eric McAllister of TCU. Now you're getting into your day 3 receivers. 37 receptions, 727 yards, 8 TDs, 19.6 yards per average for a guy that goes about 6'1", 205 pounds, catches the ball well. The critics say he's a little bit soft, but when I watch him, he's always fighting for the contested throw. I think he's a potential very good number 3 receiver on Sunday, and you're going to find him probably available maybe late third round, beginning of the part of round 4. Then you got a couple of lesser known guys. Jace Brown of Kansas State, another speedster, 36 receptions for 577 yards. He's more of your slot guy. Somebody you gotta line him up backed off the line of scrimmage because he's a smaller guy, but he's 40 fast and he's football fast. Ted Hurst of Georgia State, caught 5 passes for 110 yards with 2 TDs against South Alabama last week. 47 receptions for 689 yards in 8 games this year. He's a bigger possession guy who's got really good playing speed. You're looking somewhere in the middle of day 3. Ted Hurst of Georgia State. Georgia State is 1-7. They're in a terrible season. Their offense is not good, but when the ball's in the air, more times than not, it's going to Ted Hurst, and he always makes the reception. A local guy for you and I, Skylar Bell of UConn, came into the season with mid-day 3 grades from scouts, has played to that level. He's a guy who is the man in the surprising UConn offense. They're having a good season this year. 68 receptions, 845 yards, and 8 TDs already this season. More of a possession type, although he's got some quickness, not a bad route runner. But again, Skylar Bell of UConn, a day 3 pick. And in a year where it's not top heavy at the receiver position, you're going to be looking for those gems late in day 2 on day 3. There's guys like Skylar Bell of UConn, Ted Hurst of Georgia State, Jace Brown of Kansas State, and Eric McAllister of TCU. Those are guys to keep an eye on.
Tony, every year, you always say that there's going to be wide receivers in the draft. But going into this year, we had a lot of questions about this class. But as few players at many positions have emerged in this class, I said maybe some guys at edge and maybe some guys inside on the offensive line as tackles get moved inside. I feel like we're going to have a lot of wide receivers in the first 60 picks of this draft again, just because there, frankly, are not that many impressive players at other positions, and they just throw a lot in college football, and these wide receivers always tend to emerge every year.
And it's a need position. I mean, it's a passing league. You need the quarterback. You also need the pass catchers. And, you don't need just 2 pass catchers. Now you want 3 or 4 pass catchers.
Yeah. No, you're right. All right, so let's get to it. Speaking of it being a passing league, let's talk about the 2025 draft class, Tony. I think we have to start at the quarterback position. And I'm going to start locally here with Jackson Dart. And I think it's fair to say Jackson Dart has been the most impressive rookie quarterback in the National Football League this year.
It's not even close. I mean, hands down. If the New York Giants lose every game the rest of the season, but Jackson Dart continues to play at the level he's playing, if not better, it's a successful season for the New York Giants. I mean, despite the wins and losses, because you got your guy at quarterback. And it's not just the way he's playing, it's his aura. I mean, you watch the guy, the body language. He wants to get out there. He wants to compete. He's making good decisions, except for that New Orleans Saints game. I mean, you watch that Denver game, which was back and forth in that fourth quarter. He takes him to a huge early lead. Denver comes back. He wants to get back on the field. You see his body language. He wants to get out there and fight, and he's making good decisions. He's making terrific passes. He's seeing the field. The game is not going a million miles an hour for a rookie quarterback who didn't start until a few weeks into the season. And again, I mean, if he continues to play at this level, this season has been a success for the New York Giants because they have their quarterback moving forward.
And now let's go to the Tennessee Titans, Tony. And I agree with you, by the way. And I think Dart has shown a lot of some high-level skills, the pocket movement, the ability to throw on the move. He keeps his eyes up when he moves up in the pocket. Now, I think there are some fundamental things, the art of playing quarterback, getting through your progressions, not dropping your eyes when the first guy's not there. He held the ball. His average time to throw last week was over 3.6 seconds. That's obviously way too long. But that's stuff that rookie quarterbacks learn as they go. I think he's shown a lot of intangibles so far this year that have to give Giant fans a lot of hope that as he learns to play quarterback and kind of all the mental stuff and of playing quarterback in the National Football League, that he has the tools to be a starter for a long time.
I'm going to give him a pass on holding the ball a little bit too long. Doesn't have Malik Neighbors now yet. He does have Malik Neighbors
That's a
for
good
the rest of
point.
the season. I mean, they're not deep at the receiver position. They've got solid tight ends, but they don't have that dominant number one tight end. He loses Scatterable last week in the game. So, I mean, that wasn't a persistent problem in college.
Yep.
Given the state of the Giant receiving core, I'll give him a pass on that.
No, I think that's fair. And then you have Cam Ward, Tony, and as it has been too often with first overall quarterbacks over the years, he's already going to have a second head coach and second offensive coordinator in 2 years, which you never want to see. His stats are underwhelming: 58%, 1,600 yards is pretty good, 5 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he's only rushed it 16 times for 40 yards. So the stats underwhelming, but I think we've seen enough flashes that I think both of us are still pretty high on what Cam Ward can become if he gets the right coaching staff in there.
You better have a new offensive line too, especially at left tackle, because they signed, I believe, Dan Moore to a pretty big contract in the offseason. He's been terrible. They can't protect him. The running game's The receivers aren't great. So yeah, I think he's done well considering what's going on. You mentioned the change in the coaching staff, but they really better fortify the pieces around him, especially that offensive line. J.C. Latham has been okay, moving to his more natural position at right tackle. You draft a quarterback early, and this constantly happens. You better start to invest in the pieces to protect them and then build from there. So again, I think he hasn't been great, but he hasn't been awful. But you got to look at the situation around him, which is not good at all. And I think you got to like Cam Ward for the future.
Yeah, you have a couple of building blocks in that line, right? You have Latham, Skoronski plays inside on that line too, correct? So I think those are two players that you feel good about
That left
moving forward.
side's a killer, though. That left side is killing him.
No question. I'm with you 100%. And then finally, Dylan Gabriel, Tony. He's the other quarterback that's gotten some run here, and he kind of looks like what I thought he would look like. Like he processes pretty well. He just isn't super talented. He's got an okay arm for a guy his size, but it's not top tier. And the stuff going around him in Cleveland isn't great either. So I think he's been pretty much exactly what I thought he was going to be.
I think he's playing what we all thought he would be, like a nice backup quarterback.
Yeah, exactly
he's just
right.
forced into the starting lineup. And I mean, you said he's there for his brains, for his ability to see the field, the process. I just don't know, and I don't believe, to tell you the truth, that you're going to put a franchise on his shoulders and you're going to basically build an offense, build a team around him, because I think at best he's a number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Shedeur Sanders there. He was inactive last week in favor of Bailey Zappi. So something's going on there behind the scenes, Tony. I don't know what it is, but that's something we'll have to figure out as we move forward here. The running backs, it was a good class last year, and we've had some very productive running back play, Tony. I think they've met their expectations, despite the fact that the Raiders have been just maybe the worst team or the second worst team after the Jets in the National Football League. Genty is over 4 yards a carry, just 445 yards. I think you'd like a little bit more production there, but given what's going on around him, I think we get it. Quinshon Junkins, despite only playing in 7 games and really only being a full-time running back for, I think, 5 of those, almost 500 rushing yards already, 5 touchdowns. And then, Cam Scatterbo is the other guy in this category that I want to touch on before we hit kind of the next two. He was leading rookies in scrimmage yards before he got hurt last week. So he had over 400 rushing yards and 200 receiving yards. So those guys have all, I think, met expectations. And by the way, I'll throw one other guy in this group, Marion Hampton. Before he got hurt, he was playing really well for the Chargers. So I think all 4 of those guys, which again, you look at their body types, Tony, they're 220 pounds. They're bigger guys. These are the guys that I think teams are more willing to kind of give a lot of touches to because they think they can kind of handle them a little bit.
Go back to what I said about Cam Ward, protecting him. We knew coming into the season there were going to be questions about the Raiders' offensive line. Those questions have grown. I thought they were going to be better off taking Armand Membo. They take Genty. You see the ability. But if this isn't Saturday football. This isn't college football where he's just going to be able to create yardage when nothing's there because the players are so big and fast. He's got to get some help up front. Junkins has been a battering ram with all that offseason stuff, and he wasn't in training camp. And then that situation got figured out where there was no legal charges against him. He's come in, and that's what we saw from him, especially down the stretch last year. at Ohio State. He is a violent runner. He is a guy. He has the agility to get around the corner, but he turns it upfield and watch out. Cam Scatterbo, we said this before, when he was drafted by the Giants, he was going to be a legend. He was going to be a legend for Giant fans. It's sad to see the ankle issue. I'll let you go about him on further about him, but he was good catching the ball as well as running the ball. I also
And he
think
was
that
pretty good in pass protection too, Tony. He was doing a good job picking up the blitz.
I mean, he came in as a polished prospect. You knew what you were getting from him. I didn't think the upside was that great. Because he's big, he's not super fast, but you knew what you were getting from him, and he's produced, I think, a Ja'Cory Krusky merit of the Commanders, a guy who he played 2 games as a senior because of the eligibility issues. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl. I think he's done a good job, and Woody Marks has done a terrific job as both a ball carrier and pass catcher this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on Scatterbo, Tony, I wondered whether or not the ability to break tackles and run with power at his size, because he's not the biggest guy, right? He's kind of just stocky and he's like a bowling ball. But it's played, man. He breaks tackles in the NFL too. And again, you hope that he can bounce back from this injury and he looks like the same guy. Obviously, a very serious one. He's been released from the hospital, according to the Giants, after having surgery after the game with that ankle injury. So hopefully he bounces back. Tony, you mentioned Woody Marks, and that's a guy that we saw as like a hybrid type of player coming out, right? Kind of a third down back. The 3 guys that were also picked in this draft, 2 of them early. R.J. Harvey has had moments for the Broncos, but I think with the emergence of J.K. Dobbins there, he hasn't gotten quite as many touches as we would have thought. And Travion Henderson has had trouble getting a lot of run, because Ramondre Stevenson has played well. And, one of my favorites, so I have to bring him up, Brashard Smith, in a very small role for the Chiefs, has been good as a receiver, but they don't seem to trust him as a runner. So I think, and this is why I brought it up earlier with kind of those 4 guys we led with, they're all kind of bigger backs. These are all smaller backs, and I think you're seeing NFL teams trying to figure out how to use them, because I don't think they see him as guys that can be their bell cows in the running game.
The funny thing is, R.J. Harvey we'll see. I mean, he had a breakout game on Sunday. We'll see if they keep the momentum going, if they keep going back to him. We knew that, he was a Sean Payton type of back. So, is the future now for him, or do they continue to rotate to him and Dobbins, who was a terrific runner, except for all the injuries that he's had? And it's funny that you mentioned that the bigger backs, are we going to see bigger running backs starting to be taken earlier in the NFL draft? Is there a return to that bigger 220-pound feature runner with the success these guys are having?
Remember, teams are playing a lot of 2 safeties deep now, Tony. Gap scheme, duo, power run game is back in style. So I think we are, but we'll have to see how that goes when we get there this year. All right, let's jump to the pass catches here, Tony. And let's start with the tight ends. Because how about this number, Tony? 3 of these tight ends we're about to talk about, in terms of rookie players, receiving yard leaders, they're 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the National Football League this year. Tyler Warren, Oronde Gadsden, and Harold Fannin are 3rd, 4th, and 5th in receiving yards by rookies in the NFL. And all 3 of those guys have certainly showed what they did in college was no fluke. And I know you're loving the Gadsden thing, because you were all over him coming out in the draft last year.
Thank you for that.
And by the way, I love Fannin, so I was right on him, and you had Gadsden.
Start with Warren. I mean, I wrote an article before that Warren was going to have a big year because it was going to be more of a dink and dunk type of offense with the Colts. They didn't have any downfield threats. Well, he's turned out to be more than that. And he's starting to stretch the field, a lot of yards after the catch. We're getting what we thought from him or saw from him at Penn State, and he's delivering a little bit more. As far as Gadsden's concerned, I mean, I said prior to the draft last year that I thought that the best tight ends in the end from the 2025 draft would not come from the first round, would come from the middle rounds. And I mentioned Elijah Arroyo, who's had moments at Seattle, hasn't been consistent, and Oronde Gadsden. And it just boggled my mind really through the entire 2025 draft process how Gadsden, who was a 220-pound receiver at Syracuse, turned tight end, and then we saw him at the Shrine Bowl in excess of 240 pounds, yet he was moving like a 220-pound receiver.
And apparently, Tony, he's up to 250 now for the Chargers.
Catching everything in sight. He's got the bloodlines. why this guy was being so ridiculously underrated. And yeah, I mean, I love seeing it because I thought he was underdrafted, and I knew he had that potential. You're not going to use him much as a blocker. I'm sure he'll learn how to block, but you've got a 250-pound tight end basically who's a former receiver, and he's proving it. And Fannin, I think Fannin has done much better than I ever would have thought. Yeah, I agree. You were right on the money with that one. And, we knew he was a downfield pass catcher, had huge production at Bowling Green, and he's been able to transition that to the NFL, where now it looks like the Browns may try and move Njoku because they don't need him. They get something in return. They got their tight end not only for the present but for the future in Fannin.
Yeah, no question about it. They've done a good job. And then one of your favorites, Colston Loveland, hasn't quite gotten off the schneid yet, Tony, dealing with some injuries.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, we knew that coming into the draft. I mean, he had that AC shoulder injury last year, which kept him out of most of the season at Michigan. He did no testing for the draft. I was told, yeah, he's healthy. He's healthy. Obviously, he's not been healthy. It was, I don't want to say it was a risky pick for Chicago to take him at 10. Right now, it seems like one, but with all these other tight ends that we just mentioned doing so well, and the first tight end of the drafts selected in the first 10 picks, really sitting on the sidelines, he's got to get on the snide real quick.
Yeah, and by the way, and you mentioned Elijah Arroyo. He's been basically playing almost half the snaps. So he's been on the field for Seattle. They run a lot of two tight end sets, him and A.J. Barner. And I think he's going to be good. He just hasn't quite broken out yet. Which, by the way, remember, he barely played in college. He was hurt the first few years of his career, so he's the guy that needed a little bit more experience, I think, to kind of get going a little bit. All right, let's jump to the wide receivers here, Tony. I'm going to start off with Tet McMillan here. He's second in terms of receiving yards among pass catchers that are rookies. 37 catches, 512 yards, 2 touchdowns, second in receiving yards. And I think he's been exactly as advertised. Both of us loved him coming out. We didn't understand why he wasn't talked about as being a higher pick. And look, we'll see what it looks like now with Andy Dalton in there for Bryce Young. But the Panthers needed a number one type receiver, and I think he's going to be that guy.
Well, it wasn't that he wasn't talking about as being an earlier pick. I mean, he was an earlier pick. It's just that people were talking about him in the middle of the first round,
Right.
second half of the first round. And he was the go-to guy at Arizona for 2 years. Like, he caught everything. And I think a guy like Dalton in that offense, which is hit and miss, they like to run the ball, and they do a good job running the ball, wants that bigger possession, consistent, reliable receiver. And that's what McMillan is. And again, it's great to see him doing as well as he did, considering the disrespect that he was receiving outside the scouting community, because obviously the scouting community liked him so much that they took him as a top 10 pick. But the way people kind of dismissed him, which I never understood.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I should have talked about how the pre-draft fake fall that people were talking about with him never made a whole lot of sense. Now, then you have two receivers in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay drafted these wide receivers, and we sat there like, how much opportunity is Emeka Egbuka going to get with, Chris Godwin coming back, Mike Evans there? And lo and behold, both those guys are hurt. So Emeka Egbuka is automatically the number one wide receiver for Tampa Bay, Tony. He's made the most of it, leads all rookies in receiving yards with 562 on 34 catches, and he has been a downfield threat for them. He's been great.
He's been fantastic until he got hurt. He had a hamstring issue, which kind of slowed him up. But he was not only a downfield threat, he was a big play, big impact guy that would come away with important catches. And Baker Mayfield's the kind of guy, the kind of quarterback that if he doesn't like you or he doesn't think you're not going to be able to do the job, he's not going to throw the ball to you. And he is, when when Evans and Godwin were on the sidelines, he had all the faith in Egbuka, and he was throwing him the football in big spots. And Egbuka was coming away not only with downfield catches, but with outstanding contested catches up until the time he hurt his hamstring. And he's still producing, not at the level he was. But, and again, when they made this pick, Tampa, a lot of eyebrows were raised. Why are they taking another receiver when you look at the guys they have on their depth chart for as long as they have? Why didn't they take a pass rusher? Why didn't they look in another direction? And it looks like they've hit a home run with this selection.
Yeah, and you also had the second-year wide receiver out of Washington, too, coming back for them, and he tore his ACL in the offseason. So they really had a lot of wide receivers, and he's now had an opportunity to do it. And I have to tip my cap, Tony, because this was one of my guys in the draft last year. Tez Johnson, he's got an opportunity now with all those injuries we talked about. Tiny, did not test well at all. But if you watched him on tape, nobody could cover him. Nobody could cover him all year for Oregon last year. So for me, I'm so happy to see the job that Tez Johnson has done and the opportunity he's gotten. He's played a couple games, 15 catches, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he sees the opportunity. And he's going to be a player in this league for a long time now.
Making a lot of difficult receptions. You mentioned didn't test well. Everyone thought he was a 4-3 guy. At that size, he ran in the 4.5s, which is why he dropped. But he's a good pass catcher. You just got to line him up right. You got to use him off the line of scrimmage, put him in the slot, keep him off of press coverage, move him around the field. And again, the fact that Baker Mayfield is throwing him the ball, getting the ball to him, I think says a lot about Tez Johnson.
And Alec Iomanner, he's done a nice job too, Tony. Calvin Ridley has not done a great job this year, and Iomanner's picked up the slack.
Thanks, and I'm sure Cam Ward is very happy. I mean, Iomanner is a guy that didn't have a big body of work, wasn't a great route runner, big body guy, long arms, soft hands, and is doing that in Tennessee. So that is one of the building blocks that they can go with.
All right, let's talk about Travis Hunter now. And I think the big question that we talked about endlessly last year, Tony, was how would he be drafted? What would he be drafted as? And how he was going to be used? So far this year, I broke it down. He's taken 323 snaps on offense. He's taken 162 snaps on defense. Both of us thought it would be a lot easier to be a full-time defender and a part-time receiver. The Jaguars have done this the opposite way. Now, there's been some issues with the Jaguars and their passing game in general this year. Hunter does lead them in receptions with 28, 298 yards and a touchdown. But they seem to be struggling to figure out how they want to use him as a receiver. Brian Thomas Jr. the same way, who has not had a good second year. But he's on the field a lot. He's making an impact. But I still feel like the Jaguars are feeling out how to best utilize his skill set on both sides.
Well, they better figure it out soon. I mean, they gave away a ton of draft capital to move up, 3 spots to select this guy. I think you're doing a disservice to him by spreading him out so much. I always liked him as a receiver. Develop him as a receiver. Put him in dime packages on occasion. Let him develop at one position and take it from there. They said from the beginning, we're going to use him on both sides of the ball. I don't know if it was a selling point or not. I mean, I think Trevor Lawrence has not developed the way many of us thought he would. He looked good early in his career. He kind of seemed it's been a bit of a rocky ride for Trevor Lawrence. You know, all those snaps on defense, just leave him at receiver. Let him develop at receiver. Occasionally put him on defense. You got to develop a team here. They're not a winning organization. And I don't think, fans may like seeing Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for the Jaguars.
All right, Tony, let's jump to the offensive line now. And surprisingly, I feel like the tackles have been better than the guards so far. I know the tackles are drafted higher, but usually that's a tougher position to play. But you look at some of the highest drafted tackles, Tony. Will Campbell's been good. Armand Membo's been good. Kelvin Banks has been good. Those are 3 hits there in the first round at the offensive tackle position. And by the way, I think the Cowboys are pretty happy with Booker at guard as well, even though he's had some injury issues.
They are. Now, Campbell started off very rocky. He didn't have a good preseason. Early on in the season, he did not do well. He's really starting to turn it on, as are the Patriots. And, we knew going in, you want to develop Drake May, you better get a blindside tackle to protect him. The better Will Campbell has played, the better Drake May has played. I mean, Drake May is playing lights out because he's able to stand upright. And Will Campbell, as he's developed and gotten better and better and better, has been a big factor in that. Armand Membo, he's a little bit up and down. That first week against Pittsburgh, I was like, wow. He was just destroying everybody on the opposite side of the line that Pittsburgh put in front of him. He's had a few problems with penalties. Illegal motion, things like that. Overall, though, I think the Jets have got to be happy with him. And then Kelvin Banks. I mean, we've talked about it before. How many times have the New Orleans Saints selected an offensive lineman early in the draft? They keep doing it. It looks like they hit with Kelvin Banks again at the all-important left tackle position.
I agree. How about the interior guys, Tony? Who have you liked so far?
I think Gray Zabel's done well. You look at his overall game. You look at the fact that they're really struggling on the interior of that offensive line in Seattle. I think he's done very well. Tate Ratledge of Detroit has had his moments. He's definitely a Dan Campbell type of offensive lineman. I think Donovan Jackson, who's been a starter since week 1, has also done relatively well in the Vikings offense. That's been up and down.
Agreed. Don't forget, Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risk into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, let's go to the defensive front here, Tony. These are guys that play up on the line of scrimmage. And we've had some really good players get drafted, and I think they've done a pretty good job. I think the early returns on this rookie class, Tony, have overall been pretty positive. Let's start with the two guys inside you want to focus on. Mason Graham has 13 pressures this year, according to Pro Football Focus. He's done a nice job for Cleveland. And then Jamari Caldwell, who both of us liked as a mid-round pick, he's been fantastic as both a run stopper and a pass rusher for the Chargers.
Caldwell had the size, he had the athleticism, he had the quickness. I question his play strength. That seems to have worked itself out, and I think the Chargers really got to steal with this guy because he's elevated his game from the college level. He's got great size. He plays with leverage, and he's really starting to put it together. Mason Graham has been a consistent force, really, since week one. He's not dominant, but I think he's got good returns. The fact that, you look at the overall picture with Cleveland, they were able to trade down, get a first-round pick in next year's draft, and still take Mason Graham, who's having an impact on the defensive line. I think that's a major win for Cleveland.
I still wonder if they could have traded down again from that spot, Tony, and got even more picks. But Mason Graham is a good player, so you can't argue with that. The two edge players, I believe they were the first two edge players taken, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yep. Abdul Carter, obviously number 3 to the Giants, almost double the number of pressures of any other rookie. Only a half a sack, which is disappointing, Tony, but, sacks can come in bunches. It doesn't necessarily, define how well you're playing. He's certainly been in the backfield a lot. He had a good game last week. He consistently leads the Giants in pressures, or at least he does from week to week. Brian Burns also having a really good year, so is Kayvon Thibodeau. And then Micah Williams, a very different type of edge player for the 49ers. He was slow going as a pass rusher this year. He's been good against the run all year round, which is what we thought he was going to be with his size and his length. But he's coming on as a pass rusher, too, as the Niners now need him, too, with all their injuries they have on defense.
Well, it's funny you say that because Michael Williams is getting the opportunity because of the injuries, and he moves into the starting role, where Abdul Carter is really rotated in that 3-man rotation and is not a consistent starter. And that may be good for Abdul Carter. Keeps him fresher, doesn't put all the pressure on his shoulders, and allows him to develop his game. But, I mean, both of these guys, I think, have come in and helped, especially Williams, with, as you said, with all the injuries. And I think Williams – I'm happy because I think he was unrefined and there was more upside than there was, say, production on the college level as opposed to Carter. But he's starting to put the pedal to the metal now, and he's turning that great athleticism and that great potential into production and into productive play.
And I want to mention a couple other guys, Tony, that you didn't have here that I want to bring up. I thought Donovan Ezeraku, one of my guys coming out, I think he's done a nice job for the Cowboys. He has 17 pressures and 9 quarterback hits, which is the most quarterback hits of any rookie and the second most pressures after Abdul Carter. And he's had 70 fewer pass rush snaps than Michael Williams. So he's done it in fewer snaps, but he's been pretty productive for what otherwise has just been a terrible Cowboys defense. And then the Falcons, I think their defense, even though they didn't do too well last week, for the most part this year, they've done a pretty good job. And I think they got to be pretty happy with what Jalen Walker and James Pierce has given them. Remember, they traded up for Pierce back into the first round to pick him. They picked Walker as well. I think they have to be pretty happy with what they've gotten out of those two guys.
Walker, I believe, is now dealing with an injury.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens with that moving forward. And the Cowboys are going to need Ezeraku. I mean, if they have any, whatever hope they have of making the playoffs, they need help on the defensive line. So maybe he gets more snaps now unless they make a trade before the deadline.
All right, off-ball linebackers, Tony, and two guys have really jumped off the tape, and then I'll let you hit on the other two you want to talk about too. But Carson Schlesinger, this Browns draft class, by the way, despite the fact that the quarterback situation is extremely messy, it's going to be a pretty good draft class. We already talked, this is the third round that we're talking about. We talked about Quinshon Judkins. We talked about Mason Graham. Well, here's their third pick in this draft, and that's Carson Schlesinger, who's been phenomenal. He's been all over the place. His play strength has been better than what I thought it was going to be. And then Jihad Campbell for Philadelphia. Nakobe Dean missed earlier in the year, so he was an inside linebacker next to Zach Bond. Now that Dean is back, they're putting him on the edge with all the injuries the Eagles have had on the edge. He's played well there. He covers. He stops the run. He rushes the passer. Both those two guys, I think, have been fantastic.
Well, actually, Schlesinger's the fourth round we talked about because you forgot Harold Fannin.
Oh, I forgot about Fannin. That's right.
Graham and Judkins. So I wrote an article right before the season about how in love the Browns were with Carson Schlesinger and how people were talking, if he stays healthy, he could be the defensive rookie of the year. And literally through the first 8 games, he's been more consistent, played better than any rookie, in defensive rookie that was selected in the 2025 draft. Now he suffered a high ankle sprain. We'll see how much time he misses or how he does. But as far as I'm concerned, he's the best off-ball linebacker we've seen this year from the rookie class. No doubt about it. Can cover the pass. Tackle numbers are off the charts. I hope he gets back on the field soon. As far as Jihad Campbell's concerned, it's kind of been up and down recently. We'll see what happens. But I mean, credit to Howie Roseman. And I know Giant fans don't want to hear that, but there was a lot of injury concerns, a lot of red flags with Jihad Campbell. Howie Roseman said to hell with it. And he's done this before with Alabama kids. You remember Landon Dickerson, with all those knee injuries, people thought he was going to fall. Roseman took him in the second round. It's worked out well. He takes Jihad Campbell, moved up a spot to get Jihad Campbell. Actually wanted to move up even further to ensure that he gets Jihad Campbell. And Campbell has been what we all expected him to be, but he's been healthy. And that was the big question about him. As far as the other two guys, Teddy Buchanan out of Baltimore, the guy who came from Cal, big, fierce pursuit linebacker, goes sideline to sideline, a ton of tackles this year. And Barrett Carter at Cincinnati, the Bengals actually have two rookie linebackers. But Carter has played so well that some of the veterans are now asking to be traded.
Yeah, Logan Wilson.
Yeah. Because they're not going to get their jobs back, as he's been a consistent starter and he's got great upside. And we knew this about Barrett Carter. I mean, Barrett Carter coming into the 2024 season, we thought he was going to be a first-round pick. He did not play well as senior season at Clemson, fell in the draft. But if you go back and you watch him as a sophomore and a junior at Clemson, he had first-round potential. He's playing like a top linebacker now.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, let's go to the defensive backs here, Tony. And Trey Amos has been probably the best secondary player on Washington teams this year. Their safeties have been rough. Marshawn Lattimore has been rough. They whiffed on the Emmanuel Forbes. I guess that's 2 years ago now, right?
I think it's like 3 years ago, but whatever it was.
No, I think, yeah. And then Trey Amos has been great. I mean, he's been starting outside for them. He's big. He's physical. And I think he's going to be a good man cover corner for Washington for quite a while.
The thing about Amos that you got to like is the consistent development. I mean, going back to his college years at Louisiana, then at Alabama, then at Mississippi, and now at Washington, he seems to get better and better and better. And he's got great size. He's got outstanding length. As we talked about in the lead up to the draft, he's one of those cornerbacks that does a great job getting his head back around and making plays with his back to the ball. And he's transitioned that, and he wasn't a first-round pick. So, Dan Quinn's got to be loving what he sees from him.
Yeah, two other corners, Tony. Will Johnson, again, he had some injury issues, but he's back now. He's playing outside and starting for Arizona. And then Jacob Parrish in the slot for Tampa Bay has been their slot corner all year long, and he's done a really nice job in a secondary that otherwise has been pretty banged up.
Been an outstanding nickel corner for him. Again, you mentioned Cleveland with the four guys. Tampa has had a real good, getting a lot of productivity from their draft class. I don't know that Parrish is going to be anything other than a nickel in his NFL career, but they are just as important as your outside corners. He's done terrific. And Will Johnson, listen, Will Johnson did not play well in 2024. There were injury issues, but you go back during his early Michigan career, he looked like a first-round corner. And when he's healthy and he's on the field, he is a terrific shutdown cornerback. It's just a matter of, can he stay healthy, or are those injury flags that pushed him out of the first round, going to rear their ugly head throughout his career?
All right, now let's touch on the safeties, Tony. Andrew Makuba has basically been a starter for Philly all year long. He's had some flash plays. He had some rough moments a couple weeks ago against the Giants, too, but he certainly has shown to be a playmaker. Jonas Sanker has been fantastic. When I was preparing for the Giants-Saints game earlier this year, I thought he was playing really good football, and you have him marked down here smart and steady. Well, he's had big plays, too. He has a couple picks. He makes plays on the football, playing tight ends man on man. He's done a nice job. And then Xavier Watts, again, he's been starring for the Falcons at safety. They have a young defense that's played pretty well this year, and I think he's been very, very solid, which to me is not a surprise. I thought he should have been a second-round pick. He dropped, and I think the Falcons got great value with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to Makuba. I mean, the Eagles have needed a safety for the longest time. They get one. Makuba was what, a third round pick, so they get a starting safety in the third round. And he was good in Texas. He's better than Philadelphia. Sanker. What reason I said smart and steady is he didn't have great testing numbers. He wasn't a guy who
Right.
tested off the charts prior to the draft. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. He was really good at the Senior Bowl. Has really transitioned those instincts and that consistency into the NFL. And Watts is what he is. I mean, he's just a tough, consistent, not a guy that is going to wow anybody with his athleticism, but he's just out there on every down making positive plays.
All right, Tony. So I want to wrap this up here by saying this, and I want you to remind me of this when we're doing shows in February and the beginning of March. Don't care so much about combine numbers.
Yeah.
You look at some of these guys here that have played the best football, Tony. Donovan Ezeraku, he did not test to test crazy. Mason Graham did not test crazy. Michael Williams did not test crazy. You look at the wide receivers. Emeka Egbuka wasn't a great tester. Ted McMillan wasn't a great tester. Eliko Iomana was not a great tester. Tez Johnson was a terrible tester. All right? You look at, and was Cam Scadaboo not a great tester? Quinshon Junkins was fine. He didn't test off the charts. So you look at some of these guys, well, Johnson not a great tester. Some of these guys that did not test great, they're just good football players. Worry about the tape. Let what happens at the combine inform what you saw on tape, but always go back to the type of football players these guys are, because that really is the most important thing. And you're seeing the guys that are succeeding early are the guys that played the best football in college, not necessarily the guys that tested the best.
Go back to the Norris Sellers at the top. Some people are absolutely in love with his receiver, Nick Harbor, the 6'5" track and field sprinter. But when you watch Nick Harbor of South Carolina, he's a track and field guy struggling to become a football player, struggling to become a receiver. That's your perfect example there. And I think the other problem with the combine guys, or the guys who test off the charts, put up the Olympian numbers, is, sometimes it's the teams, it's the coaches. They'll see a guy who's 6'4", 245 pounds. He runs in the low 4.5s. He's a linebacker. They say, we're going to turn this guy. We're going to coach this guy to be a football player.
Right.
Yet he doesn't have the instincts of a Jonas Sanker. He's not the steady player of a Makuba or a Carson Schlesinger. So, yeah, it's the film, like you said, and more times than not, it's what goes on between the ears.
Yeah, and look, you're always going to have thresholds. But look, even look at Kamari Lassiter, Tony. He were almost a 4.6 as a corner,
Yep.
and he's been playing great football. Tez Johnson almost ran a 4.6 as a 160-pound wide receiver. He's productive. So, look, you don't want to draft exceptions, but again, worry about how good a football. If the guy's a good football player, he's going to figure out a way to succeed more likely than not. All right, let's look ahead to this week, Tony, and let's start here. A game that at the beginning of September we thought could determine who's going to win the Big Ten and potentially get to the college football playoffs. Ohio State and Penn State. The luster's off that matchup a little bit, but it's still an interesting game with a lot of prospects.
On the lines of scrimmage. And we've talked about the Ohio State defensive line a couple times. Guys like Kenyatta Jackson, Caden McDonald, Caden Curry, their senior pass rusher, this year's sort of Jack Sawyer type. Those guys are developing at a quick clip, and they've really helped their draft stock. You look at Penn State. We talked about Olavega Ione last week with Mike Runner. Keep an eye on him, the inside guard. He's a big, strong, tough guy. How is he going to match up against Caden McDonald of Ohio State, who's having a great year? Their left tackle, Drew Shelton, against Kenyatta Jackson of Ohio State. Shelton's an athletic guy. He blocks with great fundamentals. He just hasn't shown that wow factor yet. Took over for Fashanu and has done a solid but not a great job. And they got a nice little center there in the middle, Nick Dawkins. Again, watch him against Caden McDonald. You look at the Ohio State guys, Kenyatta Jackson and Caden McDonald, the day 2 picks if they enter the draft. Drew Shelton has day 2 ability. He's probably fallen out. Ione, if you talk to Mike Renner, you've watched the show with Mike Renner last year, he had him as a top 50 pick. I think he's more 4th round type area, but they're all NFL prospects.
All right, let's go on to USC Nebraska, a classic Big Ten matchup, Tony, that everyone looks forward to every year. But USC has a couple of wide receivers. Mekhi Lemon's been good this year. I think he had a concussion 2 weeks ago, something like that, but I think he's back. I think he had a little bit of an injury, but he's been great this year. And then Nebraska has some DBs you're excited about.
Well, USC's got 2 receivers, Mekhi Lemon, who's the quick downfield threat, and Jacoby Lane, who's the bigger possession type receiver. And, Nebraska doesn't have a great roster. They don't have a lot of guys that are day three picks, never mind day one or day two picks. They've got some DBs to keep an eye on. Sierra Wright, who last year against USC had a career game against the Trojans, he actually transferred to Nebraska from USC. He's a guy that some people like in the middle of day three. You got to watch him. Watch him. He's good in press coverage, but when he plays backed off the line or he's got to give a cushion in zone, he kind of struggles. So that's going to be interesting, especially if he's going up against Mekhi Lemon. Malcolm Hartzog, the other corner, is a solid player. And Deshaun Singleton, who at first they thought he was going to enter the draft, he was actually got an invite to the Shrine Bowl. He's your typical downhill, take your head off type of run defending safety who's good in coverage between the numbers.
All right, and finally, Virginia, who, by the way, escaped by the skin of their teeth last week against North Carolina in overtime, they're taking on Cal.
And that was a week after they beat Washington State in the last a couple of seconds. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, Virginia's great story. You consider where that program was a couple of years ago with that tragedy. They're one of the best teams in the ACC. They're playing great football. They've got the third best rushing attack in the ACC. Watch the Cal linebacker, Cade Oluvier. I wrote about him at Sportskeeda a couple of weeks ago. We talked about some of the top rookie linebackers. Teddy Buchanan, who's also from Cal. Barrett Carter. Eula Levy is just like that. He is a smaller but fierce, plays like his hair is on fire, pursuit sideline to sideline linebacker who really seems to enjoy contact and really goes after the ball carriers. Going up against Virginia's running attack, it's going to be a big challenge for him.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us. That's all the time we have for draft season, presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Tony, you got anything going on you want to let people know about?
No, I mean, Rogers and Sliders and just a lot of watching college football.
And make sure you follow Tony on Twitter. He gives all his great insights on there as well. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmuck from the Hackensack Community Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. Don't forget, you can find Draft Season on your favorite podcast platform. If you prefer video, I mean, who wouldn't want to stare at these two handsome, bald men talk about college football and the draft? You can find us on YouTube and Giants.com and the Giants app as well. For Tony Pauline, I am John Schmuck. We'll be back next week with another edition of Draft Season. We'll see you then.